Hi, my name is Nikolas-Laprade and I'm a Senior Program Manager on the Microsoft Graph team. Today I want to show you just how easy it is for you to get started and start exporting your Microsoft 365 data using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. We're going to start by giving you an overview of what Microsoft Graph Data Connect is and how it can help your enterprise, and then we're going to jump right into the demos. I'm going to show you a step-by-step methodology on how to go and create your Azure Data Factory and pipeline to start exporting your Microsoft 365 data using Graph Data Connect. And then we're going to go and do a very quick Power BI dashboard that will leverage that data and surface some insights and analytics. When you think of the Microsoft Graph, there are really three pieces to the story. The first one, which is the top left part of this diagram, is the REST APIs. The REST APIs have been around for a couple of years now, and essentially what they allow you to do is to perform CRUD operations on the Microsoft data. They're using REST endpoints that you can use in your applications. If you take a look at the top right part of the diagram, we have Microsoft Graph connectors, which allow you to ingest data from external systems that you have either on premises or running in the cloud and be able to feed that data into the Microsoft Graph. And then the third piece, which is the focus of this session, is the Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which allows you to export your Microsoft 365 data in bulk and create insights and analytics on top of it. When you think of the Microsoft Graph Data Connect, there are really three areas of focus. The first one is data at scale. Being able to export information about either all your users in your tenant or to specify certain groups you want to extract information from. Data privacy, which lets you filter fields out of the data sets that you don't want your application to have access to. And then data governance and security, giving you visibility throughout the export process as a tenant admin and letting you filter out certain aspects of the request from the Microsoft Graph Data Connect pipeline that is requesting access to export the data. If we take a look at the high-level architectural diagram from Microsoft Graph Data Connect, it starts with Azure Data Factory. In Azure Data Factory, you will go and define your pipeline to start doing the export of the data. And as part of that pipeline, you're going to define a source data set, in our case, Microsoft 365 data. You can pick any of the available data sets, such as emails, for example, would be one example of a data set we can export. Then on the other end, we're going to create an Azure storage account where the exported data set is going to be stored as a raw JSON file. In that storage account, we're going to define a container, in our case, an Azure Data Lake storage for some of the demos we're going to do later on. And then you actually need also to define an Azure AD app registration, which you're going to use to authenticate when you're doing the export. So when the pipeline runs, we're going to impersonate, if you want, we're going to authenticate using the app registration service principal in order to be able to store the exported data. The pipeline is going to run, the data set is going to be exported and stored in the Azure storage account. Now, as far as available data sets, we currently support 11 data sets. Those include, in most cases, entities that are revolving around Outlook. So we support things like users, direct reports to be able to build your own organizational chart if you want, or to be able to correlate some of the data you're exporting in other data sets as well. We support calendar view, events, emails, contacts, information about the various mailboxes, mail folders. Let's take a look at data privacy, which was one of the three key areas of Microsoft Graph Data Connect. I mentioned previously that you can go and filter out certain properties from the request. If you put that in comparison with the REST API, if you want to use the REST API, the Graph REST API, to extract information about emails, what you need to do is you need to grant an Azure AD app access to the mail.read permission that will allow the application to essentially read information about the email. But by default, that app will have access to read everything about the email, including the body, the content of the email. And in some situation, that might be a problem. With Microsoft Graph Data Connect, when you define your pipeline, you select the fields you want to export and you can actually filter out before doing the export certain fields. So in the case of emails, for example, you could load the schema and then say, I want to filter out, or I want to exclude the buddy and buddy preview fields and only focus on the from, the carbon copy, the attachments, and so on. The other thing you can do is you can also specify by default, you can export the information about every user in your tenant, or you can go and selectively pick groups in Azure AD that you want to export data from. So for example, let's say you're building a proof of concept and you want to export the information or the emails from of people in the IT and legal team. You can just select those two groups and only the entities associated with people in those groups will be exported. Now, there's also an option to approve the request as a tenant admin. This is known as the Privileged Access Management portal, right? So in the Privileged Access Management portal, you have a list of all the requests that have been submitted to export data. And as a tenant admin, you can either approve or reject that request. And that will determine if the pipeline is allowed to continue with its extraction of the Microsoft 365 data or not. As a tenant admin, so let's say I received a request, the PAM request from the example I just gave you there, where you're requesting information about the emails, including all fields but the buddy and buddy preview. So I can review the fields and say, that's fine, you're not extracting content from the email. And I can review the groups for which you're trying to export the data from. And at that stage, what I can say is, oh, you're trying to export information about people in the IT team and in the legal team. However, we can't allow you to extract information from the legal team, so I'm going to go and use the feature called as deny a list, and I'm going to filter out people from the legal team and approve the request still. So that will allow the pipeline to continue its export or the data extraction, but only for people inside of the IT team. Let's now talk about data governance and security. There are really four aspects to this key area component of Microsoft Graph Data Connect. The first one is data encryption. The data is stored in the customer's tenant and is encrypted at rest. So when you export the data, you're exporting it from the user's Microsoft 365 tenant and storing it in their Azure tenant. Geofencing. You can enforce that the data is only extracted in certain data centers or data location. Data access auditing. Because we're using Azure storage account in the background, you can put audit logs and figure out who's been accessing the data. Has anybody modified the data? You can actually get all audits logs just like it was any other files in Azure storage. And then enforcement. You can define your data policies, and if it's detected that one of your policy has been broken, or if the policy has been violated, essentially the Privileged Access Management request will automatically be revoked and the pipeline will be prevented from doing any additional export of the data. Let's now dive into the demos. We're now ready for our very first demo, in which we're going to be extracting emails in bulk from Microsoft 365 using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. There are a few prerequisites that need to be in place before you can start doing the export, and I'm also going to guide you through the step-by-step methodology on how to go and build your pipeline that will allow you to extract your emails from Microsoft 365. Let's jump into it. The first thing we need to do is create a group that will contain people in my organization who are allowed to approve the request from Microsoft Graph Data Connect. To do so, go to the Office 365 admin portal and go to Active Groups under the Groups heading. From there, click on Add a Group and select a mail-enabled security group as the group type. Click on Next. We're going to give the group a name. In my case, I'm going to name it MGDC Approver. Feel free to provide a description for the group. Click on Next and then give the group an email address. In my case, it's going to be MGDC Approver at the name of my tenant. Click on Next again, review the details of the group, and then click on the Create Group button. Our new mail-enabled security group has now been created. Sometimes it will take a few seconds before you can see the group reflect in the list of active groups, so make sure you refresh. In our case, we waited about 2 minutes for the group to show up. We're just going to fast forward in this case. And once the group is available, simply click on it from the list, which will bring the property pane from the right. And from there, simply go and click on the Members tab and click on View and Manage Members. This is where you go to add people to your group. click on the Add Members button. And in our case, we're going to be adding two users, Adele Vance and Nestor. Adele is a global reader in my tenant, and Nestor is a global admin. Make sure you select the two, click on Add, and wait for the changes to be saved. The next step is for us to go in Azure AD and create an app registration. From the left navigation, we click on App Registration, and then from here, we can click on the New Registration button at the top. We need to give our app a name. In my case, I'm going to name it MGDC app, and click on the Register button. This has created our new app registration, which we're going to use to authenticate to our storage account when we store the exported data. You need to make sure you take note of the application or client ID and directory tenant ID as well, because we're going to need them later on. From there, click on Certificates and Secret in the left navigation and click on New Client Secret. Give the secret a name, pick the expiration time, and click on Add. This will create a new secret in your app registration. Make sure you take note of the value of that secret because, again, we're going to need it later on. We now need to create an Azure storage account to store the file that's going to be exported. To do so, we go to the storage account page in Azure Portal and we click on the Add button in the top menu. From there, we select the resource group we want to create the account in. In our case, we're going to pick the MGDC Overview resource group, which we created previously. And we're going to give the storage account the name MGDC Overview Store. Click on Next, and on the Advanced tab, select the Enable Oracle namespace, which will allow us to create data lake containers. Click Next until you get to the Review and Create tab. And then from there, review the details of the storage account and click on the Create button. This is normally going to take a few seconds to complete. In our case, we fast forwarded the creation process. Once you see that the account has been properly created, you can click on the Go to Resource button, which will bring you to your storage account. From there, click on Containers, and we're going to go and create an actual container. We're going to click on the Container button and give it the name Datasets. Click on Create. Should take a few seconds to complete. And then from there, if you click on the newly created container datasets, we're going to go and add a directory to this. We're going to name directory Messages because this is the dataset we're going to be exporting using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. So the folder's been created. The last thing we need to do is at the storage account level, we need to go in Access Control and grant our Azure AD application access to write back to that storage account that we just created. So click on Add Role Assignment, and we're going to pick the Storage Blob Data Contributor role in this case. And we're going to search for the Azure AD app we created previously. In our case, it was named MGDC app. Select it and click Save to grant the permissions to the application. All the prerequisites are in place, and now we're ready to start extracting our data from Office 365. The first step is for us to go and enable Microsoft Graph Data Connect at the tenant level. This is done by navigating to the admin portal of Office 365, and then from the left navigation menu, go under Settings, Org Settings, and on the Services list, select Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which is going to open a panel on the right, and there's a checkbox there to turn on Microsoft Graph Data Connect for the entire organization. Check that box, and then in the search group box, what we need to do is we need to select the group we created as a prerequisite and basically assign the approvers group here. So remember, approvers are the list of people that are going to be able to approve requests coming from Microsoft Graph Data Connect. So once our group is selected, simply click on the Save button to have Microsoft Graph Data Connect enabled at the tenant level. What we need to do now as a second step is create an Azure Data Factory. To do this, let's navigate to the Azure portal, and in the top search box, start typing in Factories. That will actually show the option for Data Factory. Select that option, which will bring you to the creation screen. Select the resource group we created previously. In my case, I'm going to name my data factory MGDC Data Factory. Then click Next to go on the Git configuration panel. From there, just check the box to say that we will configure Git at a later time. This is not covered by this video here. It's something else that lets you manage your source control for your Azure Data Factory inside of GitHub or any other Git integration system. click Create. It will take a few seconds for the resource to actually get created, and once it's completed, you can click on Go to Resource to actually get to the Azure Data Factory page for the data factory we just created. The third thing we need to do is create a pipeline inside of our Azure Data Factory. To do this, from the Azure Data Factory screen, we will click on Author and Monitor. This will launch the Azure Data Factory workbench. From there, in the left navigation, we click on Author. Then on the right of the Filter Resources by Name, we click on the plus sign and select Pipeline. In the canvas, we're going to drag and drop a Copy Data activity, which will launch the property blade from the bottom. Select the Source tab, and let's create a new source data set. In the search box, we search for Office 365, select the data set, and click on Continue. Then we need to go and edit that data set by clicking on the Open button, and we need to create a new link services. In there, we need to provide information about the service principal ID and service principal key for the app registration we created as a prerequisite. This will load the list of available datasets, and from the drop-down, we're going to go and select the message underscore v1 dataset. We can now go back to the Pipeline tab, and in there, what we need to do is select a filter. So we're going to select the receive date time as the field to filter on. We're going to select January 1st of this year as the start date, and we're going to select today's date as the end date. This will allow us to extract all messages between those two dates. What we need to do next is click on Import Schema, which will load all the fields available in the dataset. In our case, we're going to scroll down and select the body and body preview fields and delete those because we don't want to have access to the actual content of the email. The next thing we need to do is create a sink. A sink is the location where the exported file is going to be located. So we create a new sink and select Azure Data Lake Storage. Click on Continue. The only available format is binary. Click on Continue again. And then from there, we're going to go and create yet another linked services, this time to our storage location. From the authentication method drop-down, select Service Principal. Select the storage account name from the drop-down. In our case, it's going to be MGDC Overview Store, and then provide the Service Principal ID and Service Principal key again from the same app registration we created as a prerequisite. Make sure you click on the test connection to make sure we're able to connect, and click on Create. Our pipeline is now ready. What we need to do is select the location where we want to go and store the dataset. So click on Dataset. Remember, we created a folder called Message. We're going to go in there, click on Message, select that. So this is where the file, the exported file, is going to be located. And now we're ready to go and publish our pipeline by clicking on the Publish All button at the top. This is going to ask us to confirm the actions that are going to be applied. Click on Publish and just wait for the publishing portion to be completed. Now that our pipeline has been created, we're ready to go and execute our data extraction. To do so, we need to create a new trigger. From the canvas, you can click on the Add Trigger button, and from the drop-down, select Trigger Now. This is going to automatically start the pipeline, and in order for us to monitor its execution, we can click on the Monitor button in the left navigation, and from the pipeline run, we can see that our pipeline is currently being executed. If you click on the entry for the pipeline, you're going to be able to get additional details as to what's going on with the execution. After a few minutes into the execution of the pipeline, we're going to see the status change from in progress to consent pending. This essentially means that we are now waiting for an approver to go and grant consent to the pipeline so that it can continue its execution. In order for me to go and approve the privilege access management request, I'm going to log in as Adele Vance, who's part of my approver group. And I'm going to navigate to the Settings and Org Settings page from the admin portal of Office 365. Just like we did when we activated Graph Data Connect, I'm going to select Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which is going to bring the blade from the right. And in there, we're going to see a link called Privilege Access Management Portal. We click on this, and this brings us to the page where we see all the PAM requests that have been approved, rejected, or that are pending. In our case, we're seeing that we have one pending request, so we click on it, and that brings up the data access request pane. From there, we can review details about the request, such as what data table was requested, the list of fields that have been requested as part of the request. And one thing that's really important as well is I now have access to what we call the deny list field. This allows me to filter out certain groups from my organization. So right now the pipeline is asking to extract emails from everybody in the organization. In my case, I'm going to filter out the executive group from this, and then I'm going to click approve. And then we're going to see that our data access request has been approved, and the execution of the pipeline can continue. After a few minutes, we're going to see that our pipeline executed successfully. The only thing left for us to do is to go and access the exported data. To do so, let's navigate to our Azure storage location, open the dataset containers, and within the messages folder, we're going to see that a raw file has been created. Simply download that file and open it up with any text editor to be able to see the raw JSON content that represents our messages from the past 4 months. This completes the tutorial. Hopefully you folks now have a better understanding of just how easy it is for you to be able to export your Office 365 data in bulk using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. Now that we have access to our exported data, we're going to be building a very simple Power BI dashboard that will allow you to start getting insights and analytics about how people are using emails within your organization. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do to be able to build our Power BI dashboard is load the data we've exported into the workspace. To do so, click on the Get Data button in the ribbon and go down to the More option. This is going to bring up a dialog box listing all the various data sources that are available. In our case, we're going to scroll down and select Azure Data Storage or Data Lake Storage second generation. Click on Connect, and this is going to prompt you to enter a URL. In order for you to determine what that URL is, navigate back to your storage account in the Azure portal, and from the left navigation, select Properties. In there, you're going to see the URL for every endpoint associated with your storage account. In our case, we're interested in the Data Lake Storage one. So copy that URL, go back to Power BI and paste it in, then click OK. The next thing you need to do is authenticate to your storage account. You can either connect using credentials or in our case using account keys. To determine your account key, go back to the Azure portal, go to Access Keys, and simply copy the first key. You don't need to show the key like we're doing in this example here. You can simply copy the value using the copy icon, go back to Power BI, paste it in, and click on Connect. This is going to show you the files you have available. In our case, we only have one file, which is the binary file we've exported that contains our email messages. So click on Load from there, and then we need to go and transform the data. Click on Transform Data from the ribbon. This is going to launch a Power BI query editor. And what we're going to see is that we have our file listed there, but it's listed as binary. What we want is load the actual content of the file. So beside the content column, there's this little icon to import the data. Click on this. This is going to take a few seconds. And then what we can see from the prompt is that the actual content, the raw content of our JSON file. So right now the content is being loaded in our Power BI workspace, but as a raw string that represents the JSON of our file. What we need to do is convert that raw string into an actual JSON object. To do that, right click on column 1, go to Transform, and select JSON. This is going to take, again, a few seconds. So once the conversion's been done, you can now see that the objects are listed in the column as record. And what we need to do is actually go and expand those records to be able to load the various fields. So click on the Expand button. Now you can see from the list the complete set of all the various fields that are available as part of our exported data. Click on OK. And this is going to load all the various columns in our data set. Now some of those columns still contain nested JSON objects. So for example, if you scroll to the attachment columns, you can see that it is still marked as a list. So click on this, go expand to new rows. This is going to load the actual content of the attachment. And then just like we did previously, you can see that it's now listed as record. We need to expand that. Click on the expand. And from there, you can see all the properties related to the attachment. Click on OK. And now we've imported the actual properties of my emails attachment within my data set, and I'm going to be able to interact with that using visualization. There are a few other fields in there that are also that contain sub-nested JSON object. For example, the sender field is one. You may want to go and export that. The from field is another one. So just like we did for the other fields, make sure you go and you expand those. And this is going to go and load the email address and the name and email address of the actual recipient in this case. It's going to take a few seconds and we should see data being populated in those columns as well. Perfect. The first visualization we're going to be creating is something that will let us understand how people are using attachment within my organization. I want to understand, are people using link to documents in my OneDrive, or are they actually attaching the file directly within the email? This can help me understand if my training's been effective or not. I'm going to expand the field section, and I'm going to load the OData type field of the attachment column. So drag and drop that in the workspace, and from there you're going to see two types of attachment, either inline or reference. Reference is linked to OneDrive file. Inline is really the attachment is in the email itself. I'm going to change that to use a pie chart representation. And then on the value field, I'm simply going to use a count of number of emails. We can clearly see that in my environment, there's about 0.05% of people that are using reference email, right, or reference attachments in their email. So there's a lot of room for improvement for training purposes. So I could actually go in and start a training program to help people better understand how to share documents with emails instead of sending the files and creating multiple versions across mailboxes. I'm just going to rename some of the columns to make it look a little better. And now I have it, my first visualization. The second visualization we're going to be creating as part of our Power BI dashboard is something that will give us insights as to the pattern of usage of emails. We go back to transform data to get to the Power BI query editor. Now we're going to find the sent date time column, right click on it and go duplicate. This is going to create essentially a clone of that column with the same data. It's going to take a few seconds to complete. And when the column appears, we're going to right click on it and go rename and provide it with a more meaningful name that we can actually reference in our visualization. We're going to rename that column to be sent hour of day. Now what we want to do is we want to convert the data that's in that column. We want to convert it to the actual representation of the hour of day when the email was sent. To do that, go to the Transform tab, find the time option, the button in the ribbon, and click on Parse. This is going to convert the values of that column into pure time, which will contain the hour, the minutes, and the seconds. We need to convert it again, so click on time again, go to hour, and this time select hour from the expanded menu. And now what we're going to end up with is the actual hour of the day where the email was sent. Click on Close and Apply to load the modification into your workspace. That's going to take a few seconds to complete. In our case, we're fast forwarding the operation. When everything is loaded in your data set, what you're going to do is you're going to go and expand the fields section, expand the query, and then scroll down to that new column we've created and drag and drop it in the workspace. For us, we're going to be using a line chart. So change the visualization there. Drag and drop the value of the actual hour of day. For the values, we're going to simply put the count of emails to figure out how many emails were sent based on the hour of day. And we can automatically start seeing the usage, and we can see that there's a huge spike in email activities at around 3 p.m. in my case. We can rename the fields to make sure that our visualization makes a bit more sense. So we're going to rename the y-axis by hour of day, and then the x-axis by hour of day, and the y-axis by number of emails sent. And this gives you a representation of the email activity. Another interesting scenario could be to determine who's receiving the most email within my organization, or outside of my organization as well, but who's been receiving the most emails. To do that, I'm going to use the to email address field that I've expanded from my data set, and I'm going to use the clustered stack bar visualization. As a value, I'm going to be using the count of emails, and this is going to quickly give me an overview of who's been receiving the most email in my organization. So I'm just going to expand that quickly, and we can clearly see from the diagram who the top receivers of email are. You could do something similar to emails being sent to identify who's been sending the most email in your organization, but it's just another very useful visualization. As part of this session, we've learned about what Microsoft Graph Data Connect is and what it has to offer to your enterprise. We've also showed you just how easy it is for you to get started and export your Microsoft 365 data in bulk using Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And then we've showed you how to get started with Power BI, leverage that data we've exported to create visual insights and analytics that will help you better understand how people are working using the Microsoft 365 toolset within your enterprise. I hope you enjoyed the session. I wish you well. Take care. Stay safe. Until next time.